Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Great to see you back. Great to see some new faces as well. So my niece and I was the sort of chair of the organizing committee for the conference. And so I just want to just quickly go over the day with you, and then we'll move into the first panel this morning. So the day is organized, basically we've got two panels back to back from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, followed by a break. So we're a very small group. If you want a coffee, you want some food, there's lots of it. Don't hesitate to get up and go and get yourself a drink, some water, some food as the sessions are happening this morning, okay? But there is a formal health break from 11 to 11:30, and then we'll go into a breakout session where we'll, again, like we did yesterday, we'll be exploring what are some of the key things that you're hearing that resonate with you, that make sense in terms of your experience. And then at the end of that breakout session, at the beginning of the next session, we're going to ask the people who took notes on the breakout sessions to come back and just talk about the sort of 5 or 6 main things, or the 3 things from a particular breakout session that were the strongest themes or issues that were put on the table. And then once they've done that, if they could just ask others in the group if there's anything they would like to add, that would be useful. So a brief feedback from the breakout groups, and then we move into a synthesis session that Rochelle Cote is going to moderate, that it uses the standard Vanier question. The Vanier's philosophy is always end on a positive note, and it makes a lot of sense from my experience as a researcher who's trained to be critical and negative. So the question is, wouldn't it be great if? And so that's what we'll be exploring in that session. Now, in terms of the actual program, and then we go into lunch and an opportunity to do a few things. The original program, the national group was supposed to come in at 2 o'clock like yesterday, but everything got pushed back. So we have a fairly long break there, and then if you would like to stay, we'll have the closing panel from the national conference starting at 3. There is a change to the program. Elder Emma Realis has to leave us, unfortunately, a little earlier than we thought, so she will be doing a closing prayer, or good luck for the rest of the day, a closing for us around 11 after and before the health break. Okay, so are there any questions about the program and how it's going to work today? Okay, good. So our first panel, we did this deliberately. Yesterday we had the lived experience, then we had the researchers, and now we're going to hear from the people whose job it is to serve and support the diverse types of families on the move that are the focus of this particular symposium. And Chris Shepard, the Executive Director of First Light St. John's Friendship Center, is the moderator for this panel, and we'll need at the front of the room panelist Kimberly Elms from the Gander Military Family Resource Center, Susan Hagigi? Okay. From the Association of New Canadians, Vanessa Horlick, from the Shelter Lead from First Light, Shelley Langford from the Treehouse Family Resource Center, and Sharon Warren from the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. So Chris, over to you.
So good morning. I'm going to be moderating this panel that's called Serving and Supporting Families on the Move. I'm a bit of a taskmaster with the time limits just so that we can stay on task and also hopefully get a chance for some questions from the floor and also get the panelists to answer some questions as well. And so for this panel, we have Kimberly Evans, Susie Hagee, Vanessa Horlick, Shelley Langford, and Sharon Warren. Many of you I know, amazing women. And yeah, I know everyone except for the lovely woman from Gander who I met yesterday in our breakout session. And so I will do a quick bio read, and then we'll start from left to right, and we'll do 5 minutes. I have a sheet that gives a 1 minute warning, so if you think you're getting close, just take a gander over, and I'll give you some leeway if you're close. If not, we'll shut the mics down. Not really. So Kimberly Elms. Kimberly is a social worker and family liaison officer with the Gander Military Family Resource Center and Transition Group 9 Wing Gander. With a Bachelor of Arts from St. Mary's University and a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Manitoba, along with countless professional development courses and training, Kim has almost 20 years of working in the both traditional and non-traditional social work settings. Her role with CFB Gander is to support families of uniformed members, veterans, and their families, and families of the fallen. Susie was born in Iran. Susie immigrated to Canada in 2005 and has lived in Newfoundland and Labrador since 2008. At the Association for New Canadians, she facilitates an empowerment group for refugee women, offers solutions-focused counseling services, and collaborates with government and community agencies to ensure the culturally appropriate provision of services. She serves on the board of directors at First Light and Thrive. She is also a graduate student in the Master's of Social Work program at Wilfrid Laurier University. Vanessa Horlick has been working at First Light since 2016 and has worked as the shelter lead since June 2018. Vanessa is passionate about working to ensure individuals and families receive the highest level of support they need. She will continue to aim to improve the programs and services offered. Vanessa is a single mom who lives in St. John's with her 2 children, Ethan, who is 13, and Liam, who is 8. Shelley is the parent program coordinator with the Tree House Family Resource Center in Deer Lake. One of the main roles of the position is to offer support sessions to families who have parents who travel for work. She brings a unique perspective to this role as a child of a parent who commuted for work, a spouse of a commuter, and a mother who has experienced the same struggles as the family she serves. Sharon Warren joined the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary in 1988. She has worked in many different roles in the Northeast Avalon region, including in operational patrol services, operational support services, and the Criminal Investigation Division. Inspector Warren is presently assigned as the officer in charge of East District Operational Patrol Services, Northeast Avalon Region. Inspector Warren has been awarded for her exceptional service on many different occasions. Most recently, she was given the YWCA Women of Distinction Award in 2018. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll start with the left and go right.
You hear me? Like mentioned, my name is Kim Elms. I come from the Gander Military Family Resource Center, where I'm a social worker. On 9 Wing Gander, I wear 2 hats. I also work for the transition group, and my job title there is a family liaison officer, which can be somewhat misleading because it seems to instill a thought that I may have an attachment to the military. Thank you. As a uniformed member. So I don't. I'm a civilian working with 9 Wing Gander. My role, like mentioned, is to work specifically with military families. I work with families of the ill and injured. I work with families of military members who are transitioning back to work after an injury or transitioning out of the military. And I also work with families of the fallen. With reference to mobility, my role is obviously a very significant one, since it's a key factor in military life that mobility and movement is a very strong piece of their lives. Mobility can result in positive experiences, of course, adventures, postings happen, deployments happen, and that can be very positive experiences for uniformed members as well as their families, but can also come with some challenges, certainly. Some of the challenges reference to mobility that we see are, again, with the families, is starting all over again. And deployments, or postings, can last sometimes 3 years, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, maybe a lot more. Either way, families are leaving one area in which they've settled and developed a support network, and now they're moving to a place in which they have no support networks. So we, as a Military Family Resource Center and a transition group, we try to help bridge the gap of the supports that aren't there in the initial making of friendships, developing contacts, but also certainly family members. I read a quote recently that I thought was really relevant to what I'm talking about here, and its studies have shown that military children will have to say goodbye to more significant people by the age of 18 than the average person has to in their entire lives. So you can imagine the transition that happens for families, and particularly children, when moves happen quite frequently. Some of the challenges, of course, like I mentioned, are when families do move, they don't have the supports, family, friends, so forth, which can create isolation. And when I was thinking about it yesterday, and as we talked a little bit about, of course, the mobility issue with families and so forth, it kind of came to me that mobility often creates immobility. So for the families who make the big moves, who lose a parent who's in uniform to deployment, whether it be short-term or long-term, that big mobility can sometimes create immobility. So when the families are moving to a new place and they don't have the supports and so forth, that creates a sense of isolation. And in the absence of childcare, in the absence of supports, that can kind of bring people inward. So as a Military Family Resource Center, our role is to help connect our families to the communities, not just the military community, but also to the civilian and the outside community so that they can get the supports they need. But primarily our role is to be the support that they need. So when it comes to childcare, employment services, family members or spouses who are looking for employment, because that too is a challenge. When a spouse is following a military member, they leave gainful employment and have, again, to start all over again. So we assist with the employment piece as well. Oftentimes a misconception with military folks by the general community is that once a military family comes here, they are cared for by the military, and that is not necessarily the case. The uniformed member comes and they have their doctor and they have their dentist and they have all of those supports in place, but the family members are left to the civilian side of the house, we'll say. So now they're left with the challenge of finding new doctors, and we've developed a support network to try to bridge that gap as well. Even something as simple as children who have special needs, and I think that we all are aware of the challenges that come with that, particularly obtaining assessments and specialized care for those issues. Wait lists can be quite long. In fact, we've seen military families wait out an entire wait list with their posting, and when they leave and are reposted again to another community, they haven't yet received that service from the province or the community that they're in, and they have to start on a wait list all over again in the new posting or the new community. So we try to advocate on their behalf, and we try to stay connected with the civilian community and develop partnerships as much as we possibly can to try to bridge those gaps and alleviate some of that pressure as well. So the Military Family Resource Center, thank you. The whole idea of us is to bridge a gap and help families transition and provide a service that they might not necessarily be getting elsewhere. We're not blazing any trails. We know that this is done in a lot of different places, but we do feel that we have a lot to share. Trial and error. We are a grassroots organization, so we do a lot with very little. And we feel that if we can share our ideas and so forth, that we can all become a better service to our clients. Which brings me to my last point, and I'll say it really quickly. If I could change one thing, and it goes back exactly to that, I think that communication, collaboration, and sharing information among the grassroots organizations is the key to providing a better service for people. I understand that confidentiality is sometimes a challenge for all of us. I know what that's like, and I live in that world as well. But sharing information, we can streamline services better. We can help to alleviate the duplication of service, and we can help advocate for our clients much more effectively. So that's, if I could change one thing, I think that from a grassroots perspective, I think we all should work closer together. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Susie?
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Susie Hagigi, and I'm the Settlement Social Work Coordinator at the Association for New Canadians. The association is an immigrant settlement agency located in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're proud to be celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. With offices located across the province, we provide holistic, wraparound services to refugees and other permanent residents that are rooted in the social determinants of health. Upon arrival, we assist families to find housing, enroll in language school, or to find a job, address medical and dental concerns, and connect them to community. In short, we provide supports to families to help families move towards their self-defined goals. My role in this as a settlement social worker, I do a lot of crisis intervention at the individual or family level. I do some group work. We have an empowerment group with young women who may have experienced sexual or gender-based violence, pre or post-migration. We also have a group called Mommy and Pals, and that group is to reduce social isolation for mothers with young children who may be staying at home and unable to attend school. For them, we do have an itinerant tutor who will come to their home as well to help teach English. We provide volunteer services, to connect people to community. So it is important to understand how geographic mobility has affected newcomer families. For some, mobility brings economic, academic, or career opportunities. But for refugee families who arrive in Canada due to reasons that may include war, conflict, or persecution, mobility across borders is crucial to physical safety and well-being. These are the families I wanted to briefly talk about today. It's important to understand that their migration was not by choice. It's also important to recognize that most refugee families arriving in Canada did not have the luxury for preparation or planning. Most were unable to choose where they would go or when. Some may have waited in refugee camps up to 20 years or longer, with limited access to clean water and medical care. Families fleeing conflict may not have had the opportunity to send their children to school to teach them the importance of play and downtime, having family time. The opportunity to create a warm and safe home and community, to practice their skills and knowledge, or to address those medical and dental concerns. They may not have had the ability to worship their faith publicly. These are the things we support families with when they arrive. This transition may seem daunting, to rebuild a life in a new country with what may be a different language and culture, but refugee families embrace this challenge. I talked about all the things that these families did not bring with them. What they did bring with them was a tremendous strength and resilience and great love for their family and hope for the future, and a desire to connect to their new home and community, to become a part of this community. I'm a lucky person to have the privilege to support these families along their journey to achieve these goals. But it's important to note that the challenges that we talk about, they don't stop after moving to Canada. Moving forward with life in a new land, with new ways of doing things is not easy. You want to find housing, to shop for groceries, to take your children to school or the doctor, but public transportation is daunting. It's limited or non-existent near your home. Taxis are expensive on a limited income. The weather here can make it even more difficult. You want to work, but your skills may not be valued or recognized. Or you have a job, but you need, that reliable transportation to get you to your job. You want to communicate, you don't know the language. You want to connect to community, this requires transportation as well. Many newcomers can feel very lonely, especially if they are without their family. They may not feel well because they have that limited access to medical and dental services. I could go on and on. What I'm saying is that mobility is key. Dependable, affordable, easy to use public transportation is critical to almost every need that we help our families with. Partnerships are also important. As an immigrant myself, I can tell you that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are a welcoming and wonderful group. This is a wonderful place to settle. While the ANC has groups, language schools, an employment center, we have daycare services, we provide limited transportation to refugees to help them to accomplish their goals, but we could not do this work without our federal, provincial, and city partners and our amazing volunteers in the St. John's community. Multi-sectoral collaboration is crucial to enhancing access to services. It is crucial to ensuring that we are a diverse, inclusive, and vibrant community. For example, we have an amazing partnership with Eastern Health, a regional health authority in this province, as well as the MUN Faculty of Medicine. This partnership allows us to provide respectful, culturally appropriate, and timely services. We collaborate to reduce barriers to access. This includes providing transportation to many medical appointments for refugee families in their first year, interpretation services, settlements to assist families to keep track of their appointments, to help them get the medicine, which is requires transportation to go get your medicine, right? Also important are programs and services that meet diverse needs. Programs and services are planned in terms of efficiency, and that is understandable. But when you have a diverse population, you must also be flexible enough to adapt to people's unique needs. We must remember the goal of programs and services and see how we can remove barriers to accessing what we create. We need to listen to how people want to be served and adapt so they can thrive. Newcomers want to succeed in Canada. They want to give back. Contributing is a huge part of connection and belonging. Refugee families may bring limited supports, but their potential is limitless. Recognize that what we offer is crucial to successful settlement, empowerment, and independence. As helpers, we need to be guides and not leaders. Relationships matter. Trust will not be built without this. We need to ask, never assume, harness the strength and culture, recognize spirituality as an important source of support, and finally, as you said, recognize that the work cannot be done alone. The support of the newcomer community and provincial partnerships and support are critical. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Next up, we have Vanessa.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I work at the First Light St. John's Friendship Centre at the shelter. The shelter is a 10-room shelter that offers accommodations to both medical clients and homeless clients. The medical clients are traveling here from Labrador. They could be visiting with sick family in hospital, or they come for medical appointments on their own. The homeless clients we serve are through Newfoundland Housing, through the Department of Children, Seniors and Social Development, along with multiple other providers. Within our clientele, we have a broad range of different populations we serve, whether through medical or the homeless. We are able to provide services to support both individuals and families seeking shelter, which consists of men, women, youth, seniors, and families. Aside from emergency housing clients, the Department of Children's Services and Social Development avail of our services to assist families with visitation with their children through supervised access with the support of the Friendship Centre. Being able to provide support for families, youth, and homeless who face barriers within society through our support, resources, and many programs that are offered to help transition them successfully back into the community. Some of the programs we have available through the Friendship Centre, they consist of our cultural support, our men's group, Baby Meet program, the Breathe program, and Cedar group. These are just a few services we provide, which can take away the mobile issues many are facing due to not having the supports, transportation, or childcare available. Being able to provide child minding so parents are able to connect with other parents through peer support and activities have helped provide support through our clients. We also support clients from corrections, those who have been dealing with addictions, clients struggling with health problems and financial difficulties. We have a support system in place of support staff, social workers, offering programs and resources within our centre and community. Even with the programs and resources we have in place, there are still barriers we face. Our clients face, such as affordable housing and accessible housing, transportation for homeless clients due to our limited transportation, which can be difficult for seniors and clients with limitations. These are ongoing issues we continue to face each and every day with hope we are able to provide a service with less limitations in our near future.
Sharon.
Good morning. The Royal Newfoundland Constabulary is a provincial agency and has jurisdiction in Northeast Avalon. Our Northeast Avalon jurisdiction includes St. John's, Mount Pearl, out to St. Francis and Cape Spear, and up to and including CBS and the border of Seal Cove and Holyrood. We also have a detachment in Corner Brook, and we have a detachment in Labrador City, which takes care of Labrador City, Wabush, and we have a detachment in Churchill Falls. Although our mobility is basically on the island of Newfoundland and Labrador, we do face some challenges when we transfer our members. We have about 400 members, a little over 400 members, with 110 civilian employees in the entire organization. So working in this environment that's paramilitary, of course, we are under the governance of the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary Constitution, the Act, and the RNCA collective agreement. So there's a lot of guidelines and things that we have to consider when we transfer our people. So we have about, I think there's 18 currently attached to Labrador City Wabush detachment. We have 3 in Churchill Falls, which includes a supervisor and 2 constables. And then we have about 50 out in Corner Brook, and the rest are all in the Northeast Avalon, and spread between Operational Patrol Services, which is our uniform services, and our Criminal Investigation Division, and then our support services. So you've seen our mounted unit, we have a Marine unit, we have the K-9, we have our traffic unit, so we're pretty well far spread. For the uniform services and the traffic services, our mobility is basically, our office is our vehicles. So everything that we need throughout the day has to be in there. So Newfoundland weather, in the winter we have to have enough to, if we have to be outside for hours on end, we have to have that equipment available to us in our vehicle. We have to have all the paperwork, we have computers in there for our data entry, we have cell phones to keep us connected, and of course we have our communications, our radio system. Geographically, Newfoundland and Labrador creates some problems with our communications because of the ability to continue that service and to have that, like cell phone services is sketchy in places. The same sketchy places that creates issues with cell phones creates issues with our communications, our radio system. So in this environment, of course, people see us as a service provider. Sometimes those issues hinder our service provision, and it creates a little bit of frustration sometimes in our members to be able to do the best that they can to get to an emergency response situation safely, keep themselves safe, and to get there in a timely fashion in order to take care of the situation that they're going to. So they had to arrive safe in order to be of service to you. In this entire environment, when we originally started our detachments in Corner Brook and Labrador City, they were brand new, and there was a lot of people who wanted to transfer to these areas, and they chose to go there. So throughout the organization, the most junior qualified person would go, right? And in those days, it was the senior people who chose to transfer to these places that got sent to these detachments. In the last 15 years, we've made a little bit more of a transition period, because these are small detachments, they're small communities, and we want our police to have to create an environment whereby they give you the best service, and they got to be careful that they don't get ingrained into the community whereby they can't keep that separate focus and do the right service and make the right calls, because they put themselves in a more of a community frame mind instead of the professional mind. And not that it has been a huge problem, but that was the mindset of why we wanted to move people in and out a little bit more. So having said that, what we find now is that we are forcing people to transfer to these places against their will. They would be the most junior qualified people. And in that environment, I find that we're putting people in those areas that don't want to be there. And sometimes they, depending on where they're to, if they're taking it for promotion, they may be later in their career, so their significant other has work, the kids are in school, they have their sports and their activities, and we're moving into an environment that, because of their profession that they chose, their family kind of has to suffer. Although we support them by compensation, we help them, we pay for their move, and we do have housing available for them in Labrador. Those other types of issues, and we have certain people now. We have the supervisor in Churchill Falls, his family is here, he's in Churchill Falls, that's a 2-year posting. That's difficult on both sides. My husband is actually in charge of Labrador, and although we've been married for 27 years, we have 4 children, but we're living in 2 separate homes right now. He's living in Labrador City and working from there. And the cost of travel back and forth for him to come home to see his family is difficult. So there's a lot of difficulties, and I could go on for a long time, but I'll stop there.
Karen. And next up we have Shelley Langford.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to applaud everyone that shared their stories yesterday. It's because of your strength and your courage to share those stories that we are able to bring quality programming in, for me anyway, at the Treehouse Resource Center. We are a nonprofit organization. We offer free program to all families in our community with children 0 to 6 years of age. We have a main center in Deer Lake, a sister center in Pasadena, satellite centers in White Bay, Bombay North, and Bombay South. Back in 2010-11, our parent program coordinator at the time, Myrna Moss, who is now our executive director, noticed a large increase of families who have a spouse that works away from home. So she decided to start interviewing these families, and through the interviews, she seen that there was a huge need of support for these families because they face a unique set of challenges with having a spouse that's away for sometimes a few days, but sometimes it's also a few months. Through interviews and through reaching out to the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center, she was able to develop our Home Again, Gone Again program, which offers support to those that have a spouse that works away from home. That's the role I'm in now, a parent program coordinator. We offer 1.5-hour sessions to families in need. And so every session we have a parenting topic that relates to the home and away lifestyle. And we do a craft with the mom and the children, because initially it was just for moms, but we've seen that with being in that type of lifestyle, childcare was also a big issue for them. And so we started letting the kids come as well. And so we offer something to keep them occupied, and we normally have a volunteer there as well to help out with that. The main challenges that I've witnessed, and there's been many, but I think the top 3 would be the lack of family support. Many of the families that we service, in particular in Deer Lake, they've moved to that location because of the proximity to the airport, because their spouse is flying in and out, and they want to keep them home as long as possible. So that also created a large gap between them and their immediate families. So many of them have at least an hour commute to their closest family member, but many have a much longer distance in between. So they look to us for support, and but we can't always give them the support that they need to, like even when a child falls ill, and giving them someone to watch that child, or so they can go to work, or just being there to help them out through that. So that's one of the big challenges that they face. Childcare would also be a huge second. A lot of them with the home and away lifestyle, they don't want to have their child in daycare when daddy is home. I'm going to say daddy. There are moms that do the lifestyle as well, that they are the ones that travel. But for us, it's typically dads that are away. And so a lot of facilities that offer childcare don't accommodate those kind of schedules. So a lot of these moms have decided to stay home, often sacrificing their career to do so, so that they can not only make the most of the time dad is home, but also be there to raise their child, so they're not incurring that extra expense of a full-time childcare space when they're only going to need it half the time. I think the third challenge would be the lack of resource material. We've been developing resource material every month for each session, but there's still so very little out there, and as far as I know, we are the only resource center in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador that offers this kind of support group. And there are many families across the island that really need the support as well, as we have so many families in mobility. The big thing I feel that we could do to improve these situations is definitely reaching out to other resource centers and bridging that gap between our centers. Even though we service different types of people, the challenges that they face often are very similar. And I think, as you said earlier, that by sharing our information is going to free up more time to really provide that service to the families that we serve.
So next up, we have an impromptu speaker, Kathy Hawkins, to make sure we have a nice, diverse group of viewpoints, and so she's going to get 3 minutes.
Thanks, Chris. I recognize that we don't have anybody on this panel that is talking about folks with disabilities and the challenges and accessibility needs that people with disabilities require when they're traveling within the province. And I know that I'm speaking in the next panel talking about an initiative that we're working on, but I do want to talk about the challenges that folks with disabilities experience when they're commuting and traveling in Newfoundland and Labrador. We don't have accessible transportation. We don't have an accessible bus system provincially, and we have a quasi-accessible ferry system that I'm going to be talking about in the next panel. We do have a lot of different service organizations that provide supports to people with disabilities, and that provides peer supports to folks when they're looking to get services in terms of transportation. We have a lot of people with disabilities that have to come to St. John's for medical appointments. We have a lot of people with disabilities that live in inaccessible communities who come to St. John's because it's the most accessible city in our province, and it's not very accessible to begin with. You probably heard Julie talk about some of the work that she's done with her family around accessibility yesterday. But really, if a person with a disability needs to come to the city for a medical appointment, and lots of times they're coming from childhood right on up to adulthood because they're meeting with specialists at the Janeway, or even in terms of post-secondary education and those sorts of things. So we have a number of organizations that provide supports. We have Easter Seals, we have Spina Bifida Association, we have the Spinal Cord Injury Association, as well as CNIB, who provide direct supports to people as it relates specifically to mobility. Lots of times when people come to the city and they're all of a sudden presented with an accessible bus system, with a, Go Bus transit systems, they have no idea how to use that particular system. So then we match people with others with disabilities who know that system, and then they go off and provide a peer experience around that. So while I recognize that there wasn't anybody on the panel this morning, it's because we couldn't find anybody at the last minute to talk specifically about transportation, because many of our service organizations provide a broad spectrum of services, of which transportation would really only be one of them. And lots of times that's really encompassed in a peer support model where folks are learning from each other in terms of how to use the transit system within St. John's, as well as how to organize an accessible system in order to get them from rural communities into the larger city as well. So I just wanted to bring that point forward as well.
Thanks, Kathy. That was 2 minutes, 46 seconds. And it's interesting because we talk about mobility and accessible spaces, even in St. John's. I think we have one of the few buildings that can be classified as heritage downtown that has a lift and an elevator, which we know how much that costs to do. And it's interesting in a lot of funding applications that accessibility isn't a line item that is actually available to you. And so another interesting fact is that several years ago, the province actually created this one-time accessibility transportation pot of money where you could apply to make transportation accessible. However, NGOs were not considered eligible, which was interesting because we tried to become eligible because we do transportation, but we weren't a for-profit transportation company. And so it's not like some of these things haven't been tried. It's just that the partnerships haven't really been there to make it work on the ground level where the need is there. And that's one thing I think we heard across the panel is that the partnerships from grassroots organizations and the ability to work together to sort of leverage each other's resources is really important. Some of the challenges really are is that if you even combine all of those resources, it still may not be enough because everyone is stretched and everyone is operating at a deficit of what they could really do if they had the appropriate support. And so I'm really happy that we have 10 minutes where we have an opportunity for members here to ask our panelists some questions. And so I'll give people a minute or so or less to ask their question, and then we'll get some time to respond, and we'll try to get as many questions answered in a good way as we can. So, microphone one.
I'll go here so I don't have my back to anyone except Rob. So thank you all for presenting. You can hear me okay, right? Everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm going to borrow from Nora Spinks' strategies and ask you to think of one word, one issue, because I mean, we're hearing again, like yesterday, we're hearing themes, we're hearing differences, but we're also hearing themes across the panel. So if you could say in one word, what is the issue that you think would be the most appropriate for you, for your agencies to collaborate on in support of families who are dealing with mobility issues? What would be the one word that you could think of that would describe that issue? I mean, I sort of, now I'm coming to mind of a universally designed, one-stop, huge family resource center for, that would be lovely if it was housed in a building just like this. Kim?
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but partnership is what comes to my mind. And I listened to the 3-minute speech on Kathy, right? Sorry, Kathy, on mobility and disabilities, and it put me in mind of a program that we have, and this would certainly not address the problem in a grand scheme of things, but for military members and veterans, there are programs available that can provide funding for vehicle modifications. So we can have access to monies that will modify vehicles for veterans who have disability issues or their families. It doesn't just it isn't just for the military member; it can be for their families too. So that might, on a small scale, address some of the issues that you brought forth. So that's what I mean by sharing.
For me, I think it is, I think the word is access. Again, for our families, they have such barriers to access, you know, due to language and cultural barriers, not understanding systems, how to navigate through systems. And again, systems think in terms of efficiency. You know, if you want to deal with income support, you have to call on the phone and be able to communicate your needs. That's a real barrier if you think about it. Accessibility for refugee children and adults with disabilities is huge. Again, the supports are around basically families providing supports to, for example, children with disabilities. And people are arriving who may have never had assessments done, never, you know, we've had people, you know, who have never been in a wheelchair, who have never been mobile. Their parents have carried them, and they are 18 years old, and they're arriving in their parents' arms, and they need a lot of work to you know, they need surgeries, they need assessments, they need a lot of physical therapy, and most importantly, again, that connection to community. We want to get these young people out there making friends, letting them realize their full potential, and it is almost impossible to to connect them to services, because if they require someone to support them as they, you know, we can get them the Go Bus, but then we have to have a support worker. Oh no, but this support worker, they will provide respite for the family, but they will not go with them to A, B, or C. And then how do we connect these people to community? And we've got their caregivers don't speak English, they don't understand, and their concept of disability may be a little bit different. So that is one thing. We do need to rethink the way we see families and the supports that we provide. Again, that flexibility. It's wonderful that we see families as caregivers and as that resource, but we have to recognize also that one fit may not work for everyone.
I would say support through the different outside organizations, especially when it comes to our homeless clients. There's a barrier there when it comes through they're seeking housing. We only have limited on what we can provide. Through like the medical transportation, we've had a senior in the past who needed to get to an appointment at the hospital, but we could not. The medical transportation wouldn't provide that transportation for them because they were in too close of a distance to the hospital that we need to get them to. So we had to use some different outside organizations in order to help us get the senior to his appointment. Because our hands were tied, and medical transportation wouldn't help us in that circumstance. So the biggest thing is transportation, especially when you have youth who are looking for housing. We only have bus passes, that's all we are able to provide at this time. And we have very limited. So when we have up to 15 people staying at our shelter, and you have 2 to 3 bus passes, it kind of limits what the help and support that we can provide as well.
In our case, I guess it would be more easier access to information and to the supports in having these transfers done. As an organization, when we transfer our members from one detachment to another, we look at the organizational needs and the requirements and whether or not we're within all the guidelines and that we're abiding by the collective agreements and stuff. So if we're forcing somebody to move because they fit the bill and we have nobody that volunteers to transfer to these jurisdictions, then their family has a choice on whether they go or not. And that's not really a great choice sometimes, but depending on where they go and depending on what needs they have. So if you have a child with special needs or you have counseling or doctors and the resources are not available in the jurisdiction that we're transferring you to, then that's a very difficult decision to move that family to somewhere where they're going to constantly need to come out. Creates a financial stress on the family, and it creates that division between the two parents, or it might be your spouse that needs all these supports. So we do a really good job internally as an organization of taking care of our own. We all contribute as members to a medical fund that officers can tap into if they need that. We do have family responsibility days that we offer through we have sick leave and those types of things. And as an organization, as the members themselves, we do take care of our own in that aspect of it, but it's not consistent and is not something that's broad-based or supported outside the organization, so it taps into the members themselves to support each other. And if someone gets transferred and their spouse has a job here, then it's not that easy sometimes for that spouse or partner to move and find somewhere there. So although we compensate financially for the move, and like I said, in Labrador City, we do have forced housing that's available at a decent rent. In Corner Brook, they have to find their own housing. And with the way that we've changed our recruiting, of course, we're not getting just all 19, 20-year-olds. We have people who have had established careers. We've got people who have families. We have people who are coming into a secondary career of policing, so they're at a different age. So now our recruits are from age 19 up to 47. So with that comes the different dynamics and the different needs and necessities to address those types of things. And the old way of doing things, the paramilitary way of doing things, is very difficult for some of those aspects of it.
Probably connection for me. I find our province is often divided into sections. So like I'm in Western region, so I know what resources I have access to in Western, but I have no idea who to contact in Central because we have families that relocate as well. And is being able to recognize who we can say, well, contact this person when you go to St. John's. When you make that move, these are the people you want to see to help you out. So I think like breaking the barriers, I guess, between the divide, opening up the connection between each different sector and also between the different sectors. For us, like I have RNC moms that attend sessions, and I have doctors that attend sessions, but I also have low-income families that attend sessions. So we have a very diverse group of people that come to our center. So being able to like give them direction to where they need to go if we can't provide the service that they need.
It's great being a 3-minute presenter because I get last word. It's awesome. I have 3. I have education. You know, from an accessibility perspective, we need to increase education. And then my second would be an accessible lens. If everybody, when they're planning events or just going throughout their daily activity, apply an accessible lens to whatever your activity is, then you would be able to see if you're providing a service that's barrier-free, because it's not connected to the person with the disability. It's connected to whether or not you're providing a service barrier-free, and that's the mind shift that we're trying to change. So education and an accessible lens.
Thank you, Kathy. And with that, it is 9:59. So, one question.
One question.
One final question.
Okay, yeah. Tony Fan from Mind Economics and the Jaroslawski Chair. And I heard very diverse experience and challenges for families with mobility issues here. So I just wondering, you know, this is one of the important challenges once in a lifetime, is the change in social relations. And so I just wonder, how ANC or Military Family Support Resource Center, how to support the youth, right, when they have experienced very important changes in their lifetime, how you can help them to develop kind of coping strategies or life skills for adaptation and resilience.
From a military perspective, can you hear me? Okay. From a military perspective, military children are incredibly resilient, and it's the only life they've known, is to travel around. So luckily, they've developed a resiliency that we don't see the challenges in them as much as the general public would see, because the general public would look at families and children who are moving around a lot and say, oh, it must be so hard. But for the most part, it's their norm. And I heard a funny story yesterday. There was a 6-year-old little girl in our resource center, and she said that she was moving, and it was very normal for her. And she said, one of the girls at work said, oh, we wish you weren't going. She was so lovely and sweet and stuff. And she said, we want you to stay. And the little girl looked at her and she said, well, aren't you moving? So it's a real norm for them. Having said that, we do have to put services in place for the challenges because not everybody is able to cope with the transition and the move. So we try to offer services that would be therapeutic type services, mostly in a supportive nature. We try to connect the teens and youth with outside community programs that might help them. But we stay, and I stay in my profession, very connected with the schools. So I work very closely with guidance counselors. I work very closely with teachers and principals to identify issues and make a connection between what the parent is saying, what the youths themselves are saying, and then what the schools are seeing as well, and try to work in partnerships for those folks there.
And also for Susie, also for the second generation migrants and youth?
I think, again, we take a holistic. Can you hear me? Okay. We take a holistic approach. For the moms and dads, it can be a loss for them. It's almost a loss of social status, where they're coming and they're having to go to language school. They may not be able to have the independence at first and do all the things that they were used to doing. Again, their job, their language has changed, may need to change. For the children, children move quite quicker. They go to school. They learn English at a much faster rate, we're finding, and they start to take on new responsibilities. Sometimes responsibilities they really shouldn't be at their young age, interpreting for parents, making some decisions even. So what we do is we have settlement workers in schools, in the elementary schools, the junior highs, the high schools, to work with families. For the older children, there are some transition programs, but again, we work very closely as well with the guidance counselors, with the schools. We have homework clubs. We have children's programming through the ANC, but also connecting children to community programming. The REAL program is a program in St. John's for recreational activities, Boys and Girls Club. We are connecting children to their peers, and that is a huge part, but also working with the family to ensure that children get to stay children, because again, these shifting dynamics, people kind of have to work through, and that can be a difficult process.
Thank you so much for the people who gives voice, or giving a voice to those who support and serve families, and these individuals who have the lovely and sometimes challenging task of mediating between government and service agencies. So thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we just grab a quick 10-minute break, washroom break, and so on, and then go on. I think we have some space, certainly over the lunch break. So just take 10 minutes, get yourself a fresh cup of coffee. The washrooms are out the door and to the right, or if you go out that door, they're outside there. And we'll reconvene for the next panel in about 10. Thanks to Chris for running such a tight ship.
Good morning, Greg. I think you should be hearing me right now. Let's see. I'm going to see if I have your sound here.
I'll try that again. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Now I can. That's perfect.
Great.
All right. So, yeah, we'll have you up. You're just kind of in the back of the room right now. They can hear you at the moment, but I'll mute you before we're on about a 10-minute break. So you'll start seeing some... I'm not sure which camera you're seeing at the moment. Let's see. you should. You're likely seeing our up around the room. That one should give you a view of the room. Okay. So
Yes. Yeah, it does.
We'll put up the podium camera, so you should start seeing some action there and hearing people from the podium when we're coming back. But I'll let everyone know that you're online and ready to go.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Greg.
I've been up there, but I just can't remember. I've only been up there once, so I'm trying to figure out where to go. I just texted me up. I'd say it's going to be like 1 o'clock. It's usually around 1 or 2 o'clock, so I'm waiting for a text me. So what are you thinking? No, I'll just walk after.
Okay, I think we probably should start to drift back slowly. I can see Rob Greenwood is the next moderator, and I have his heavily underlined program. Is he even here? Oh, okay. I don't see him.
We met over in the hall at a concert. No.
Oh, he's not?
Yes. We might as well keep her going.
Rob, are you hiding behind a pillar?
He was here just a second.
I know. Okay, well, hopefully Rob will resurface. In the meantime, I'll just introduce the next panel very quickly. So the next panel is on positive collaborations for research, service, and support for families on the move. The moderator is Rob Greenwood, and we've got 5 panelists. Kathy Hawkins, who you just met from Inclusion Newfoundland and Labrador. We have Gregory Legasse coming in remotely from Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services. I'm talking briefly about the On the Move Partnership. Constable Brad Squires from Indigenous Policing and Restorative Justice, and Dr. Dorothy Vandering from the Faculty of Education, and Rob has reappeared. I have your heavily underlined program.
I am prepared.
So maybe if the panelists could come up to the front, well, I think Rob will introduce them in more detail.
Yeah. And we'll have you all present from here when you do your 5 minutes, or? Oh, okay, good. Yes, so let's get all the panelists up to the front. We need some more chairs there, John. Or do we have enough? Oh, good. Sorry. So we're missing, we're missing Barb, that's all. Good. So I'll do brief introductions. Kathy Hawkins is currently the manager of InnovateNL, Employer Supports and Services Program of Empower, the Disability Resource Center. As manager, Kathy provides supports and services to employers interested in creating more inclusive workplace environments for current and new employees with multiple types of disabilities. Also in this capacity, Kathy has worked collaboratively with the Department of Transportation and Works Marine Services to increase accessibility and inclusion within our provincial ferry system. Gregory Legasse, hopefully I got your name close, is on our screen there. Gregory joined the National Defence Team in 2007 to lead and direct Soldier On, a program he created during his employment with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. After 11 years with Soldier On, he made the decision to join the Military Family Services Team to oversee the implementation of the Seamless Canada initiatives of the Department of National Defence. Dr. Barbara Neese, who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give one, is John Patton Lewis Distinguished University Professor at Memorial. Based in the Department of Sociology, she is also the co-director of the Safety Net Center for Occupational Health and Safety Research. And in 2018, Barb was awarded, jointly with Dr. Christina Murray of UPEI, the Vanier Institute of the Family Marabelli Glossop Award for Distinguished Contribution to the Work of the Institute. Lots more I could say about Barb, but that's specific to this session. Constable Brad Squires has been a member of the RCMP for 10 years. He has served in large municipal detachments and rural detachments in BC and Newfoundland and Labrador. Brad is currently an officer with the Indigenous Policing and Restorative Justice Section in St. John's. He resides in his hometown of St. Philip's with his wife and 2 children. And I have to brag at this moment that my son graduated from the RCMP last week. And he's moving back to Newfoundland. He's going to be based in Grand Falls, so we're over the moon. And finally, Dr. Dorothy Vandering is an associate professor at the Faculty of Education, Memorial, and director of the Relationships First Restorative Justice Research Resource Center. After an extensive career as a primary elementary educator, she now researches the implementation and sustainability of restorative justice in education. At the core of her work is establishing relational dialogic networks that create space for the voices and needs of those most affected. She has published widely in various academic and professional journals and is co-author of the Little Book of Restorative Justice in Education. So I think we'll go in the order I did the introductions, and you will get 5 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll go some questions for the panel, and then some questions for the audience. So, Kathy, your 5 minutes.
Great, thanks, Rob. I get last word, and now I get first word. That's great. So, don't know if I did a proper introduction in terms of what InnovateNL and Empower, the Disability Resource Center, does before, so I just want to take 30 seconds of my 5 to do that. Empower is a cross-disability organization that provides services to folks with disabilities, and it doesn't matter to us what the disability is. We offer and host a whole range of services for folks, and we've got well over 400 folks with disabilities who are members. We have a whole collection of services that we provide specifically to people with disabilities, like peer support and career development and the IL internship program, and the program that I'm connected to and manage is InnovateNL. We're the newest child in our family, and we are responsible for providing the corporate support. So we work with any type of business who wants to increase their accessibility, create barrier-free environments, and to build their disability confidence. One of those partnerships that we've developed has been with the Department of Transportation Works and Services through the marine services sector. And we've been working with them now since August 2017. I can't believe it's been that long, but what originally started out as a change in policy and a change in practice and initiated in a very negative light, I feel has come to a very positive fruition in terms of the work that we've been doing. Initially, when the Department of Transportation reached out to us, they were in the process of changing their policy where passengers were required to exit their cars, to leave the vehicle deck, and to move up to the passenger deck. And prior to August 2017, that policy wasn't necessarily as enforced as what they needed to be. So they asked to develop a partnership with InnovateNL so that we could make sure that the route from the vehicle deck up to the passenger deck was barrier-free for people. Now, of course, we've got a provincial ferry system that is expansive in terms of the types of ferries, the age of ferries, and those sorts of things. When the partnership was originally developed, it was because of some unhappiness with the commuting schedules specifically for the Belle Island Ferry Run. And when we originally started, we felt that we needed to help support marine services to make sure that passengers coming back and forth on the Belle Island Ferry could maneuver through the ferries in a very accessible way. So we started our work there, but it very rapidly grew. And we've been continuing to work with marine services ever since, and we just think that's awesome because what we're doing really is breaking down barriers, specifically with a provincial ferry system that has a wide range of different types of ferries. So when we started, and just this particular work is very timely at the moment because Canada right now is currently reviewing legislation to enact Bill C-81, which is the Accessible Canada Act. And within that act, there are 3 or 4 different priorities. Transportation is one of them. So when we started working with our provincial transportation service some years ago, we really felt that they were providing some excellent foresight because as a disability group, we knew that this was coming. And we also knew that our provincial government had a mandate to create provincial legislation as well, of which our provincial Department of Children, Seniors, and Social Development is currently in the process of setting up these standards. So our process was a 3-tier or a 3-component process, and we modeled the work that we were doing with marine services based on the Canada Transportation Agency Code of Practice specifically for ferries, airplanes, and transit bus systems for the vehicles as well as the terminals where they would be congregating. Our work involved doing accessibility reviews of the ferries, as well as providing inclusion awareness training for all the crews. It also includes developing a communication package to support the work of marine services, where they would create policies that passengers are required to know, and we would provide them in multiple formats, so that each ferry would have a package of materials for passengers that would be in Braille as well as alternate formats. Look, 1 minute. So very quickly, we have already reviewed 8 of the ferries. We have done Bell Island ferries, we've done the Fogo Island ferries, we've done St. Brennan's as well as Pelly Island, and we've done Burgeo ferries as well. So we've traveled all around. We've also completed disability inclusion awareness training for 16 of their crews, which is just absolutely awesome. And one of the things that it's done, and before Rob whacks me on the top of the head here, because I'm getting down, one of the things that's been really significant in terms of a conversation that we did not realize was going to happen was a conversation with crew members. Because what you're not aware of is that disability, the onset of disabilities typically starts at around the age of 40. There aren't very many crew members that are under the age of 40 in our provincial system. They've got a long-standing record. And there are a lot of crew members who are acquiring disabilities. So it really gave us an opportunity to have that conversation, as well as just open the conversation more generally about creating a barrier-free, accessible ferry system for commuters in our province.
Thank you, Kathy, and very punctual. So we'll stay in the order in which I introduce people. So Greg, you're next. You can't see me, so I'm going to jump in if you need a little reminder with a minute left. So over to you.
Thanks, Rob. And I have my cell phone. I am going to hit start for the stopwatch because I don't feel like getting beat over the head all the way from Newfoundland. So I started my clock here. So first of all, thanks. I much appreciate the opportunity to come in, present collaboration, some of the lessons we learned, talk about why we collaborate. What I'd like to do is take a 3-step approach. One, I want to talk about kind of the keys to success or to a successful collaboration. I'll talk briefly about the collaboration we're involved with and then end it on why we collaborate. So for me, over my 20 years of experience, I think there's really 3 keys to a successful collaboration. One, it always starts with a shared vision. I think you have to have a why. And what I mean by a why is, what motivates you to get up every morning? What motivates you to work with another organization? As you heard just from Kathy, it's really around that accessibility. And I mean, I know something about that because I worked with the Canadian Paralympic Committee for a number of years. And I actually was involved, Kathy, with helping draft some of that legislation with my good friend, Minister Carla Qualtrough. And it has to be something that people are passionate about, that there's a cause. It's something that evokes emotion. You all got to be pushing in the same direction with the same level of effort. And that really, listen, that effort's going to wane. As we all know, it starts off, it's like a honeymoon effect. Everybody's exciting. Eventually, it's going to wane a bit. And when that collaboration, that effort, that passion wanes, you really got to have that why, because that's what brings you together. It's the glue that keeps you together. The other thing is it's important to have a defined end state or a bigger picture and some clarity around everybody's role and responsibilities. I mean, I'm looking around the table, and for me is that it's a picture and it's a puzzle. And everybody, so if you were to give a piece of puzzle to everybody in that room right now and explain to them more or less what their role is, they have an understanding of how it fits in the bigger picture. And once you put those pieces together, you have clarity on what that bigger picture is. But if you don't understand what you're trying to do and you, in terms of the bigger picture, but more importantly, your role, it makes it hard to really put that puzzle together. So that to me is very important. Don't get me wrong. I think it's important that projects allow to breathe on their own and organically take shape. I often say you don't need to dot the I's and cross the T's. That's for legal stuff. When it comes to collaboration, it's just important to have an I and a T. And the last thing, which I think is important, it's all about people. And I would argue that it's the most important ingredient. You got to have the right people with the right skill set around the table that are passionate, that are willing to have open and honest dialogue. When you start to get conflict, because there's undoubtedly there'll be conflict, you're able to look across the table and see a human being, not just a professional colleague. And I think that's very key, because collaboration should never be just about a business transaction. It should be about achieving that why, and it should be something about emotion. So it is important, I think, people to really focus on the people aspect of a collaboration. So what are we collaborating with? Seamless Canada, it's an initiative of the Minister of National Defence that responds to Initiative 24 of the new defence policy, which states that the Minister wants us to work with provincial territorial governments, private sector, community organizations to look at ways that we can can connect the dots to ease the burden of relocation when military families are posted from base to base across this country. As some of you may appreciate, there's a lot of challenges when you move from one province to another, because so let me take a step back. When it comes to the military member themselves, everything's taken care of by the Canadian Armed Forces. But we rely on the jurisdiction of provincial jurisdictions and governments to provide services like healthcare, like education, like spousal employment. So as you move from one province to another, let's take healthcare. You have to start all over again trying to find a family doctor. Continuity care becomes an issue, particularly for children with special needs. When you move from province to province, a child's education, particularly when they get to high school, can be negatively affected because you have to look at Canada as 13 small little countries all under one banner. We are looking at ways to work with all of these partners to try to ease that burden. And why are we doing it? It's simple, because there's no one organization, entity, person that has the resources, the mandate, the expertise and knowledge to affect the change we're looking for. We have to connect those dots. It's generally accepted as well that organizations that collaborate promote innovation. And so that's why we're doing it. Because for me, and I'll conclude because I'm getting to my last 20 seconds here, I feel strongly that non-collaboration is arguably the greatest threat to any successful project that you're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. Those stopwatches are great things. Now over to Barb.
Rob doesn't have a stopwatch, Grace.
Oh, Rob does.
Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the On the Move partnership, where I'm a project director, and try to touch on two partnerships that we've been involved with, but I'd love to go to a third with Kathy, but I wasn't sure what she was going to talk about, so I didn't go there. So the On the Move partnership is a national program of research. We're in our 8th year. Our focus is on extended complex mobility for work, anything from extended daily commutes, for example, among immigrant workers in Toronto who are precariously employed and reliant on public transit, through interprovincial mobility. So again, in Atlantic Canada, big thing here where you live in one province and one or more family members work in another province. And we're also including temporary foreign workers in our research. And we heard that very powerful statement yesterday from Anna, who had been a temporary foreign worker, around her experiences. So we're interested in what are the drivers for mobility, but also, what are the challenges? How does that impact employers? How does it impact workers and their families? And also home and host and hub in the case of Deer Lake types of communities. So it's huge, it's national, it's being run out of here, so how do we run a national project out of here? And I would say one of our most successful national collaborations has been with the Vanier Institute for the Family. And this conference here, the satellite conference, really grows out of an earlier conference that we co-organized with the Vanier in Prince Edward Island, looking at the family-related impacts of extended mobility for work in Atlantic Canada. And that was an amazing symposium that we had. It's all recorded and online if you're interested in taking a look at it. And one of the things that happened there was we worked with another research project, Christina Murray's, in Prince Edward Island. They were looking at interprovincial mobility and family impacts, but also for service providers. But they brought in, and it makes sense in Atlantic Canada to bring military and veteran families in, because Atlantic Canada has many extended commute for work workers, but we also have a lot of people in the military in the region. And so that was the first time I had the opportunity to have this kind of dialogue across the organizations, family and otherwise, that are providing supports to people who are working in other provinces and their families, as well as hearing from military and veteran families. And again, out of that has come this satellite conference here, and I have to commend the Vanier. The Vanier have resources we don't have, right? First of all, they know how to come up with a succinct, clear statement about a problem, and they have national audience, built-in national audience, built-in national mechanisms for communicating issues, and they're extremely excellent to work with, and I would strongly recommend. I mean, I think we need to think collectively about how we can stay collectively engaged with the Vanier, because and I think they are developing this new model, these satellite conferences to broaden their reach. The second partnership, just very briefly, one of the communities we've been working with in British Columbia is Fort St. John. And Fort St. John is in northern British Columbia. It is both a home and a host community for mobile workers. And our team out of University of Northern British Columbia has a partnership with Fort St. John. And Fort St. John is investing $1 million a year in research to help its community basically deal with all of the issues that it has. It's right next door to the Site C Dam construction project. You're looking at 6,000 workers who are coming through that community. So they've been trying to figure out their working relationship with that. They're surrounded by work camps, and they're surrounded by oil and gas development. They have a very progressive Mayor Lori Ackerman, and they created an environment for our project to go into that community. It was a model dialogue that they created that I think, again, that was not dissimilar from this, except it was focusing on mobile workers. But it brought together, over 2 days, we presented the findings from On the Move from across the country. And then we had a chance to have a dialogue with all the key people in that community, in municipal government, in the transition houses, the people who are dealing with addictions, the people who are dealing with training of mobile workers. We had a dialogue with them for 2 days, and out of that came a major report that I think is a model, particularly for communities in the resource dependent sector, again, around the kinds of needs, challenges, opportunities, and strategies that communities, like many of our communities in this province, are dealing with. But I think, again, there are potential lessons here. And the final point I'm going to make before Rob brings the hook out is that I'm also involved in a long-standing partnership with InnovateNL. And I heard it this morning, that, I think addressing some of the issues that we're talking about, if we bring an inclusion lens to all our work, right? So, we have services just for the member, but not for the families, right? There are people with disabilities everywhere. If we can build communities in this province and nationally that are built on the principle of inclusion, whether it's international workers, whether it's immigrants, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's young families with or without members who are migrant. That, I think, is where we need to begin. I think that we can draw a great deal as a community from starting with that as our point of departure. If we can build communities that work for the most vulnerable, who are also the most creative, the most resilient, as we've heard, because we're all vulnerable in many ways. I think that would be the base, that and a focus on families and simple things like getting from A to B, that could really help us collectively address some of the issues that we've got across this society, and to push back against essentially a division strategy, which is, in my view, far too powerful at the moment.
Thank you, Barb. Over to Brad.
I'll start off by saying I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. Anyone who knows me knows that I prefer to hear as much from you guys as possible and that I can answer your questions. But in starting, when I was first asked to speak today, I was very happy and gracious. But when I got the information to learn that what these past 2 days are going to be about, I said, oh, okay, what do they want me to speak on? Because if you review what this conference is about, the very first thing is mobile workers. I'm RCMP. Clearly, that's what they want me to speak about. I find out, as our moderator knows, that about 3 to 4 months into our training in the middle of Canada, in Regina, if I'm going to be going to any one of our provinces or territories. Not much of a choice there. But no, they did not want me to speak about being a mobile worker. Next, I saw immigrants. That's perfect. In my role in what used to be community and Aboriginal policing, but is now morphed in the last few months to Indigenous policing and restorative justice, I've worked with new Canadians and immigrants throughout the province. One of the things that I collaborate on is I speak with new Canadians and members of Modern English as a second language and introduce them to Canadian laws and have an open and candid dialogue with them about our laws in Canada and specifically here in Newfoundland and Labrador. No, that is not what they want me to speak on as well. So I kept moving down. First Nations, Inuit, okay, I'm Indigenous policing. No, that's not what I'm speaking about today. So I keep going down. Survivors of domestic violence. Unfortunately, with my career, I've come in contact with survivors at various points in their family violence journey, and I've introduced them to as many supports as I can throughout their journey. But again, that is not what they want me to speak about. So finally, we got to people with disabilities. And I said, this must be what it is. I am a father of a wonderful 9-year-old boy who has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So as a parent, they must have wanted me to speak on how I'm quickly learning every day how our wonderful province has many barriers. And how we work together with family and friends and co-workers to overcome these. But no, that is not what they want me to speak on today. What they want me to speak on today is my collaborations with different partners and positive outcomes of those. And I'm very blessed to speak on those. What I would like to touch on, well, first, I'm looking right next to me as a partner, Dr. Dorothy Van Dering. Sharon spoke earlier. We sit on several things together. And I look out over the audience and I see several partners. But specifically what I wanted to talk today is when I first came into the role a little over 2 years ago in regards to, at the time, community and Aboriginal policing, now Indigenous policing and restorative justice. When I first took the role, when the RCMP told me I would be taking the role, I had very little knowledge of Indigenous policing within our province. So I did the research myself and I came across what was called the Truth and Reconciliation report. And I went down through the several points of the report and I looked at what I could do myself and with my organization to address as many of these points as possible. That brings our former moderator, Christopher Shepherd, into play. I then Googled Indigenous groups within St. John's because I'm stationed at headquarters. And the first thing that came up at the time was the St. John's Native Friendship Center. I'll give them a plug. They are now First Light. They had a great launch. But that's where I started. And I started there because I wanted to involve as many people as possible in my learning journey. But I also wanted to reach out to the people that I'm supposed to be helping myself. Traditionally, large organizations, federal organizations, tend to work in silos. We really feel sometimes for the best approach, we do feel that we know what we're doing, but that's not always the case. So instead of looking at what my previous people in community and Aboriginal policing had left for me for notes over the years, the 20 years that Newfoundland and Labrador has had Indigenous policing, I wanted to start fresh, and that included reaching out to First Light. So I started by going down there, introducing myself, getting to know the lay of the land. I will not lie, at first it was very difficult for myself. I was nervous going into something I did not have knowledge of. However, that's one of the main points I want to speak about collaboration is once you get over that fear of unknowing, your successes are going to be great. And once I jumped over that hurdle of my own fear of lack of knowledge, there's many partners, First Light included in this province, in this city, that will do everything possible to welcome you with open arms so that you can both reach your goals together. So I saw the first minute, and again, I said I would be brief, but 5 minutes goes quickly. So I'd love to hear from you, but that's what I'd like to leave you with, is as members of your organizations or individuals, please don't let your fear of not knowing the other groups be what holds you back. Just take that leap of faith. And my experience is most organizations and groups in this wonderful province and country will welcome you and will do everything possible so you guys are on the same page, working towards the same positive goals. Thank you. On time.
Thank you, Brad. Over to Dorothy.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. And much of what's been said on the panel, I would just reiterate as my experience, and especially Greg's list of what's important in collaboration is exactly what my work is about in Relationships First, restorative justice. I wanted to go after Brad because Brad and I do partner around restorative justice. And what is restorative justice? My area is in restorative justice education, not in the criminal justice context. But what we have discovered, of course, is that there is lots of overlap, and the partnerships and the collaborations are incredible in the province. I actually wanted to start just simply by acknowledging the courage and the resilience and the leadership of people in this room and in this province. And in particular, I want to acknowledge the leadership of Indigenous communities and their resilience in holding on to a relational way of being and knowing. Because ultimately, that's what our work is about. Our research resource center is called Relationships First. I think I would also like to acknowledge my own privilege. I am someone who is privileged on every front, and I needed to wake up. Recently, I listened to a podcast by a woman who wrote a book called Waking Up White. So I would like to just acknowledge that through my work with dialogue circles, talking circles that have really been maintained through Indigenous cultures in particular, I have had to wake up white, I have had to wake up able-bodied, I have had to wake up heterosexual, I've had to wake up Christian, I've had to wake up female, I've had to wake up second-generation Canadian, I have had to wake up. And through dialogue circles, I have had to learn to stop talking and to listen deeply, to listen in a way that would make me realize that listening, deep listening, is only when I can put everything aside and know that what I am going to hear might change me. And that's been my journey of the last weeks and months. I only have a couple more minutes. Last night, I do a master's course in restorative justice, and I have international students, and we do check-in circles and all kinds of circles, dialogue circles. And Victor from Nigeria says, "This is the first class where I know everybody's name." And shivers ran up and down my spine. Ming Yu last year in that course said, "This is the first class where I have ever spoken." And that's not just true for international students, that's true for national students as well, who have been silenced in one way or another because they are afraid. Last night, I also heard stories of Leona, who is a teacher, and she has a small class but has 8 high-needs students, and every day they start with a circle where they share highs and lows, hopes, dreams, what they ate for breakfast. Joey, who missed up to 20 days per semester last year, has only missed 3 days of school this year over the whole year. And Sam, who finds it hard to sit in a dialogue circle, sits just outside the circle and listens. And when he finally comes to circle on those few days, everybody claps and welcomes him. I could share many, many stories of what happens when people finally come to our institutions, and then how do we create cultures where people actually feel like they belong. So at the heart of our work is about creating institutional and organizational cultures of belonging, where we create space for everybody's voice to be heard. Our vision as a center is to develop communities where the inherent worth and well-being of all involved are honored and promoted. It recognizes the significance of authentic relationships in the healthy development and education of children and youth in our organizations. So, though that vision might sound idealistic in a society that is actually in many ways lost a consistent moral framework, our partners collaboratively identify that we can all agree on the value of all people being worthy and interconnected, and that our well-being is dependent on relationships. Our partners include the Faculty of Education, the Provincial Advisory Committee on the Status of Women, Thrive, Newfoundland and Labrador's Teachers Association, the NLESD, the Department of Education and Early Childhood, St. Bonaventure's College, Public Legal Information Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, Violence Prevention of Avalon East, the RCMP, the RNC. There are so many of us who are just craving relationship and needing to know how to do that. What have we learned from our collaborations? We have learned that we need to start on the ground, we need to start small, we need to be planting seeds that actually explicitly create spaces where we can say, what is it that we believe about each other? And then connections are critical, authentic connections. And where I am a person of privilege, as I started off with, I have to learn to shut up. That's another critical piece. As a relationships first center, we are small. We have huge potential to collaborate, but we're actually a little afraid of becoming too big, because then we're going to be forced into being managed by managerial systems. So ultimately, what we're working to do is moving away from managed systems to living systems, from social control to social engagement, from rule-based organizations to relationship-based organizations. And I should stop there because I'm over, but you know, what's really incredible that in our Western societies, we actually are such managed systems, but within that, we have become so starved for relationship that it's just really incredible to sit on this panel, to work with incredible people in this room, and I just want to thank all of you for your vision for collaboration and relationship, and that's what we're all about.
Thank you, Dorothy. So the panel did a great job within the time we had, and Barb, I think we could probably go to about 10 after 11, where we started a bit late. Yep. And so we have lots of time for Q&A. I have one maybe to kick us off. We do have a mic to bring to people. We heard lots on the many really insightful collaborations and learnings drawn from those. But often it's the collaborations that have challenges, or there's always challenges within collaborations. So I'd be interested from the panel to know some lessons you've learned from some of the challenges you faced in collaborations, and how you'd advise others or yourselves in future collaborations how to address those. So someone brave enough to go first on that one?
I think I kind of ended on that note, and that's in regards to my biggest challenge was myself. Again, especially in my role with Indigenous policing. traditionally and historically, my organization has not had the best relationship with Indigenous peoples. So that was a really difficult starting point for me, was to accept and acknowledge the past and the history, but also not harp on it and focus on it and realize that I can be the corner to turn. So again, when it comes to challenges, it's be sure in yourself and what you're doing beforehand. Don't go in with no knowledge. I'm an investigator by trade, so I try to gather as much information as possible. But be open. Really accept that you may hear some things about yourself or the organization you work with that are not so flattering, but don't hold on to those and just move forward to build the relationship going forward. And I did so by building the relationship with me, Brad, first, and then making the people that I was building a relationship realize that the majority of the people I work with and what my organization stands for now and going forward is the same values that I have.
Thank you, Brad. Someone else want to? Yep, Kathy.
For me, in terms of the situation, the collaboration that I articulated, my biggest challenge is how do you create a metal boat and be accessible? I mean, the boat is only a certain size. The ferry, you can't remodel a ferry in order to create accessibility. So one of the ways that we've been working to try to overcome that would be to articulate the exact accessibility features that would be available and then present that material or information to the passengers so that then the passenger can make their informed decision as to whether or not the ferry is accessible for them. Unless the particular ferry is designed in a universal model, then it won't be accessible for everybody. So at best, we can provide information to passengers with disabilities in terms of what accessibility features they would require specifically for them. We can also increase the awareness of what that looks like through specific signage, as well as try to make adaptations within the infrastructure of the ferry. Like on some of the ferries, Marine Services have developed portable ramps that can get moved to different doors, because depending on the age of the ferry depends on the size of the door sill. And we've got ferries that are 50 years old in our fleet. So so for us it was how to manipulate a system which is on a limited budget with fixed infrastructure, and the best way to open that up so that it still provides access to people so that they can commute and travel.
Context matters.
Yes.
Someone else on challenges and lessons learned.
Yep. Rob.
Yes, please.
Here. One of the things that I just want to build on what Dorothy was talking about. For me, and I think the great failures of any collaboration is not having enough diversity around that table. I mean, it's very easy to invite people that are like-minded, that think the same way. It's easy to get consensus on a theory or on a project when you have people that are like-minded. I think it's also taking the path of least resistance. If you really want true collaboration, you really want effective innovation, you have to have opposing opinions at that table. So I would suggest seeking out people that may oppose or have a different perspective, because that's how you truly create innovation and solutions that are going to address the needs of the community. As Dorothy said, and I 100% agree with this, it's one thing to hear someone, it's another thing to listen to them. And so getting diversity around the table and truly listening, allowing them to talk, and again, understanding that sometimes a win-win situation requires you to lose. I come from the sport world, and there's a great saying, in fact, it's one of my idols, Michael Jordan, basketball player, says, individuals win games, teams win championships.
Great lines. Thank you. Who else would like to jump in on this one?
I'll jump in. Thank you for that reminder, Greg, as well. And it's interesting, we have lots of partnerships, and one of the biggest challenges, especially when the partnerships are large organizations and stakeholders, is learning to recognize our own yeah, how do I say, learning to recognize our own lack of relationship. So the opposing opinions come from within, actually, which is a challenge, but is also one that it's where we have to learn to support each other, but also hold each other accountable, and that's very, very difficult. The other challenge often is that, especially when you're working on kind of a philosophical framework, you know that can be applied to everything, and so then it gets too big, and you have to learn how to prioritize what are the things you're going to work on, not just what are the opportunities that are coming your way. So how do you say no to all of the possible opportunities? And I just want to acknowledge that Rose Richardelli, who's sitting here and is also a co-director with me on the center, is an expert at helping me understand opportunities, but also learning to figure out where those boundaries are and what that means.
Thanks, Dorothy. Barb.
I'm actually going to defer to, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I had a conversation with someone at the break about a group that we weren't talking loudly enough, and I'd like to give her the space.
You can introduce yourself.
I know I should know your name, and I apologize.
Yep. You're on.
I'm assuming this works. Oh,
yep.
Does it ever?
Booming.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny the conversations you have in the washroom. But I was mentioning to Barb, one group that we haven't really acknowledged with mobility issues and movement is families with a number of small children. Outside of St. John's, you can't get a taxi with a car seat, those sorts of things. But if you have multiple children, like multiple births, or a number of children under the age of 5, essentially under 9, because 9 and under you need a booster seat. But you know, getting car seats and things like that is problematic. We also know the research shows that women who give birth to multiple children at once are 5 times more likely to suffer from postpartum depression. Understandable given sleep deprivation with more than one baby in the house at a time. But that's one group we haven't acknowledged that does have real mobility issues, especially if there are other things at play. And if I could just make one plug for Dr. Vandering's work. My little one goes to Bishop Field, and the difference that restorative justice is making in my little girl's class, which is grade 2, 16 boys and 9 girls, lots of big personalities. And they're starting to listen to one another. They're starting to respect each other. And it's been an amazing transformation, because the past 2 years, both of the teachers have said, this is the worst class we've ever had. And now it's coming around, and it's totally because the grade 6 kids are coming in and doing a circle with them every day. And they're listening, and they're respecting each other. So those are my 2 things. Restorative justice works. It's beautiful, it's lovely. And we need to keep in mind families with lots of children, especially with young children, because transportation is such an issue for them, and they are so easy to get isolated. And when we're looking at families having more children, we need to provide supports for those families who actually do take it on and have more children.
Great, thank you. So we can get the mic to anyone who would like to ask a question to the panel or make a statement on the topic of collaboration and lessons learned, challenges, advice from your own. Yep, right at your table there. You can pass the mic. Or were you putting your hand up?
Oh,
yeah.
I had a chance last time, so I was just going to see.
Well, I don't see any other hands, so you leave that to me now. You take
Can
the
I
mic.
actually, can I jump in, Gail? Yes. Gail, can I jump in for a second and just respond to the Bishop Field comment? And I didn't hear your name, so. Bishop Field is one of our Relationships First project schools, and really, really beautiful things are happening there. I think the thing that I want to reiterate is that school has been working on that transformation and the implementation of Relationships First over 4 years now. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a program. It's not something that a school can say, yes, we're going to do this. Let's have one day of PL and then we can all become relationships first schools. And what's happening at Bishop Field is because there's a realization that this is a long-term commitment. The other thing that I wanted to say in terms of mobility with young children is that when we have circle dialogues and everybody has a chance to speak, and this is what happens in my classes at university, is that very quickly, because they know each other and they get to know each other's needs, afterwards there's all kinds of arrangements being made about who's going to take who home, who's going out for coffee with who needs what, who needs food, and all of those kinds of things. And so those needs get met within the circle, where a lot of times I feel like I'm the one who needs to look out for what students need or what people need, but I don't need to do that. I just need to create the space so that people can get to know each other, because the resources are within the group often.
Okay, Gail. I think it'll come on.
Thank you. So I just want to say quickly hello to Greg. I don't know if you can see, I'm Gail, but we've had email conversations. And so Greg, along with the Military Family Resource Center, we get together we're getting together in May for the Military and Veteran Families Leadership Circle. That's just a name we made up to do the kind of thing that you're talking about, Dorothy, to move from being rule-based, who's more rule-based than the military or Veterans Affairs, to move from being rule-based to being living-based. And so, I mean, I think that's captures exactly what we're trying to do with that group, is just bringing military and civilian service providers together to say, you know, what do we have and how can we do it best? You know, what can we celebrate and where are the gaps, and what do we need to do going forward? So yeah, so it's just really exciting to hear all of your ideas around successful collaborations. So thank you again for presenting.
Thank you, Gail. Any comments from the panel on what Gail had to say, or other questions, comments?
I would just like to build on the military resources. I heard of it about 1.5 years ago, and as a RCMP officer, I'm extremely envious for what you're able to provide your families when they're transitioning and they're moving. I know something that's the RCMP is working towards, I guess, a union, for lack of better words. We have no union at the time, but that's one of the things that continuously comes up. It's a huge challenge for an individual, let alone a family or someone trying to build a family, to every 3 to 5 years possibly be moving across the country or around the world. We're posted in embassies. We do missions in Haiti and Afghanistan and Iraq. So it's really difficult. And for us, it usually is the RCMP, the individual themselves gets what they need. But you better hope that your spouse is extremely supportive and has a job that can carry with you. We constantly joke when you go to a new detachment and you meet people, you ask, are you single, or is your spouse a police officer or a nurse? Because those are generally the ones that can meet the needs of our travel and mobility. And adding on what you say, you add young kids to that, and young kids with specific needs, it makes it a lot more challenging. So thank you for what you're doing for the military families, and hopefully we can do something similar for the RCMP.
Hey, Rob, do you mind if I pipe in? I just want to address Brad's
please.
comment. And to let both of you know, actually, my daughter is about to graduate next year, and lo and behold, she wants to become an RCMP officer herself. So hopefully she'll one day join your son, Rob, and
I like
graduate and join the ranks, Brad. I don't mind letting the cat out of the hat here and letting you know, Brad, that in fact we are going to be engaging in our third Seamless Canada meeting with all 13 provincial and territorial jurisdictions in June. So we bring together, some of these people are ministers that come to the table. Some are just members of parliament. Sometimes provinces have sent senior public officials. But I am pleased to say that RCMP is actually going to be an observer at the third Seamless Canada meeting. So there is, just to let you know, that there's already dialogue happening at the very senior levels in terms of what may be possible, either to share in experiences or perhaps maybe even look at an extension of services. So it is something that has been acknowledged by, I would like to say, the Government of Canada, RCMP being one of our key partners. So hopefully in the very near future, you'll start to see some change in terms of how programs and services are offered to spouses and children of RCMP officers.
Great, thanks, Greg.
Collaboration at work.
Hey, there
Amazing.
you go.
Absolutely.
We have the mic out for another question, comment.
I just wanted to mention, I'm with the Military Family Resource Center in Gander, and my counterparts are here from Goose Bay and St. John's. But I just wanted to mention that our latest mandate that we've taken on is veterans. So my area that we have to cover from Gander is from somewhere around Clarenville over to Port aux Basques and up to St. Anthony. So we can't do it ourselves. So we have to rely on the community partners. And someone was saying, you may not get your win, or you may have to lose to win, or what have you. And in many cases, we're not the lead organization at all. But our challenge is to educate all those service providers and all those far-flung communities away from us that we do have resources to help you help our people. And I think that's the collaboration. You got to think outside the box in so many ways, and I'm sure other organizations besides ours. So, Joan's got all Labrador, and Shelley's got all in around St. John's, the whole Avalon Peninsula. So I guess I just want to make sure people understand that we're not just supporting families on our bases or on our wings. This latest edition with the veterans, we're supporting people all over Newfoundland, and we are certainly looking for partners to help us help our families, because we can't do it all. And so when we go into communities, if there's an RCMP station, that's one of the places we go, because you guys know what's going on. And even if we're just able to leave our information, if somehow you happen upon a veteran's family or even a reservist family, because they live all over the place too, then you can say, oh geez, I remember someone told me they might be able to do something for you. And that's really important, to make the connections in all the places that your people could be. And like I say, a lot of times, most times, we're not the lead organization, but we do have a little bit of something that'll help you do what you need to do with our families.
Great, thank you. And while the panel, if anyone wants to jump in on that, you can pass the mic back to the table by the door. Yep. There you go. Anyone on the panel want to jump in on what was just said, or I think violent agreement? Okay. Should come on there as you speak. Yep.
Thanks. My name is Mary Shortle. I'm the president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Labor. We represent around 70,000 union members right across the province. So union is the right word, Brad. We're really glad you guys are coming on board. We're a small organization as the umbrella group, but we represent a lot of people and their families. And we have a lot to learn around being more inclusive, obviously, because it's an organization that's been around for a long, long time. And so we do have to reach out and listen and learn. But we also have a lot to share, because we represent, there's many intersections inside our organization. So we have members who represent everything that's being discussed here. So just to reach out and say, we form coalitions lots of times on specific issues, but collaboration is a really important thing for our movement as well. And we have a lot of expertise, and we have a lot of room to grow, and we'd be very welcome to collaborate in any way at all around those issues that you're dealing with today. So thank you for having us here today.
Thank you, Mary. We have a couple of minutes. You're eating into your break, but Barb? Oh, now? Yeah. Oh, okay, didn't realize. Ah, okay. So we have time for a quick question, comment, if anyone has anything else. Anyone on the panel? Last thoughts, recommendations, partnership opportunities?
I think if I could just say, I think we're learning a lot from the children in primary, elementary, and high schools. You know, we talk about inclusive environments, and we have classrooms with 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 students in them, and we're trying to find ways for those students to include each other in very authentic ways. And what we're learning is how the barriers break down when you take the furniture away and you just have circles of chairs, or you're sitting on the floor and you can easily make space for another person. What we're learning is that children with disabilities finally articulate that their favorite junk food is nacho chips, and it's the same favorite junk food as the athlete in the class, and suddenly the two of them have something in common, and it's about what they have in common. And I share that because in our institutions and organizations, it takes a lot of energy and effort to put the tables away and to set up a circle and to facilitate a circle in which everybody, you pass a talking piece and everybody has a few moments to share, or even to just pass. Passing is a language, right? Because we acknowledge the person who has passed. And so I guess I would love to just end by saying we're learning a lot from our children, and I think we have to have the courage to create circle dialogues in our adult organizations.
Thank you, Dorothy. So I think we're going to adjust the schedule a little bit. We're going to have the closing prayer now, then we'll go to break, then we'll go to the breakout sessions. So can I ask, well, first of all, please join me in thanking the panel, here and remote. Great job. And invite Elder Emma Reelis to come up and do the closing prayer.
Thank you. I have to do my prayer early because I have a appointment at 1. So, but first of all, I'd like to say that talking about the youth and that I think they're our next generation, and I think that we need to give them all the support and all the space that they need to grow. And you know, even if they got disabilities, that don't mean that they can't become premiers or whatever. They're children, and they can make a lot of difference in the world. Thank you. So I'll do my prayer. God, our Creator, you know us, you know us better than we know ourselves. Guide us throughout our time of transition. Empower each one of us with a vision to use our unique gifts to create a beautiful life, to share our thoughts openly and honestly, to respect the opinions of others, to encourage humility, patience, and joy. Instill in us vision of life you intended for us to lead. Guided by your Holy Spirit, we will be united in love and joyful accomplishments this mission throughout our Lord and Creator. And keep faith in your Creator, and you will succeed. Amen. Thank you.
Barb or Carrie have any housekeeping items before? We'll just go to the break and then go into the breakouts after the break. Okay, thanks very much. Enjoy your nutrition break.